Welcome to the Sonic Days podcast, home of all things audio. This season was recorded live at Sonic Days 2024. In this episode, we explore immersive sound with composer and sound artist Mons Niklas Schak. Focusing on the multi-platform project Car Esquire, The Redemption Sound, Mons shares insights into blending Dolby Atmos, 3D audio, and augmented reality to craft experiences that are as innovative as they are meaningful.
Yes, I am Mons Niklas, and this talk will be about creating immersive experience on multi-platforms. And I will take you through a project that I've been working on for decades, more or less. And it still ain't done. Do I need an introduction to myself? I work with the film, theater, art installations, and music. I'm a composer, and I teach film music at the music conservatory. What more to say? As a child, when I grew up in the 70s, my hearing wasn't that well because I had a liquid in my ears, and that was a phenomenon that wasn't that well known in the 70s. So the problem was that you couldn't really understand when it was first discovered, I think, in 5th grade or something. And the problem is that you don't really hear that clear. So you can't really hear what people talking about. Today you would just get an operation in your ears and you will get the liquid out. But back then, no one really knew. Why do I tell that? I think I tell that because I think in a way that affected the way I think of music. I'm not really a guy who is very interested in the traditional musical form of melody, harmony, and rhythm. Even though that when I do film, you have to understand melody, harmony, and rhythm because it's not that abstract as it is in art installations. But my main focus is shadow of sounds in a way. And maybe that's also why I'm not really that interested in the way an instrument is sounding. I'm not that interested in the sound of a piano. The narrative in an instrument doesn't really, because it locked me to think in a certain way. So, and that's not the interest for me. The interest is more the shadow of the sound than the clear sounding instrument. And maybe also that's why a lot of my music is the music that I do for my own pleasure, what you can say, is a bit primitive and simple because it can't really stand alone in a way. It needs to be on another media, if it is art or theater or film. Yeah, but what I will take you through, and we are on a tight schedule here because we need to be someplace at 2 o'clock. What I will take you through a site-specific installation that I did in 2021, a virtual reality film with spatial audio, a Dolby Atmos release on Steam, and the binaural walk, whatever that is, and an augmented reality and site-specific installation. The first one was from 21, the second one was from 22, the third one was from 23, the fourth was from 23, and the fifth is in 25. It's not working yet, but it is in a way because it kind of exists in augmented reality. Yeah, but when we do stuff, no matter if we do film, and I don't think myself as a composer, I think myself as a person who likes to create content. And it doesn't really matter what kind of content it is, but it's just a creative process of working in depth with material. So space. We have a space. I have a space. Every time we start working, we have a space. And a space is a pattern of information that helps us understand the surrounding. Space is a pattern of information that tells us about direction, distance, and relation between objects. And it doesn't really matter if you're hearing or you're seeing or feeling or whatever you're doing. That's the space. And when you have that space, you can start thinking about how to fill that space. But I just heard expression just before. There was a guy who said he came from a visual background. I do think we all come from a visual background. I can see and I can hear, you know. So it's just, what kind of background is that? But yeah, I do understand what he's saying. I don't know if he's here. Yeah. So space is the first one you have. The first one, how do you want to fill the space? And what is space? And interaction or relation in space. You lady, huh? And the interaction in the space or the relation in the space. I think that's the two main things that we work on. No matter if we work with film, theater, games, music, writing, painting, whatever we work with, space and interaction or relation. When they first started out in film was standing on the shoulder of theater. And when the actors came from theater into film, they didn't understand the space. Because from theater, you really have to perform really clear and you have to shout, well, even if it was a silent movie to begin with, but you have to shout very loud. And it just didn't work on film because it was a different space, it was a different room, it was a different interaction. And why do we watch film? Because we want to relate to the characters, to the story, to what goes on in the picture. Because to begin with, when we start seeing the film, we know it ain't real. It never happened. No matter if it's a documentary or a fiction, it didn't happen. So we need to create relations, we need to create emotions, we need to interact with characters or storylines or environmental spaces. So there's different ways of interacting, and we are standing on the shoulder of old medias, and we're changing all the time. So film was standing on the shoulder of theater, and games were standing on the shoulder of theater and film and music, and But we interact a little bit different in games because it's the player who can interact with the game mechanics, or you can compete with other stuff, with other people. In music, we interact with music by reacting on rhythm, dancing, harmony, melody. And what is really strong with music, that we can be at a concert and we can be in the same place and we can interact and we can be on the same level, everybody at one time. And I think that's really independent, really unique with music. But why do we talk about this is because I just want to try to assemble where we are going. And we are going to all these immersive medias, which is a combination. There's virtual reality, there's augmented reality, there's mixed reality, which is a combination, and there is extended reality, and there is 360. I think we definitely have to understand the space, because the space with music that I work with mainly is not like just taking a stereo and put it into Atmos, because there's something different. There's some new opportunities, there's some new spaces that we can work with. And I think it's very important to understand that and try it out and try and error. And that's what I will take you to, all the errors that I have done over the last 10 years, the last decade. But yeah, and hallelujah, we can breathe space, life into these media with spatial audio. In 2016, I borrowed my neighbor's house up in Sweden, and I came across this very particular place with, at that time, 150 cars who was slowly decomposing in the forest. And I was so fascinated about it that I really think I had to do something. But I didn't know what I had to do, but I just had to do something. This is pictures from the place, and it's just so fascinating because it's nature meeting mankind in a way, in a really beautiful way. I do think so. But yeah, But before you start a project, you need some money, so you need to convince people about that you had to, why they should pay you money. In 2017, I started recording different sounds, and I was very interested in, and I still is, I'm very interested in impulse response. Impulse response in technology, it's been here for the last 15, 20 years, impulse response, but in life, it's been here our entire life, in entire humanity, in a way. I'm an impulse response in this room right now. The way I'm interested in impulse responses is that I was really interested in the visual reverb that I was seeing in the forest. It was a visual reverb that was slowly decaying, and the time gap in the forest was so fascinating in a way. And we all think that abandoned places are fascinating, and there's a lot of reasons why we think that. But it was really fascinating just to see it, and I wanted to figure out, could I in some way be an impulse response with sound in that environment? So I work with impulse responses, and impulse responses, the technology in music, probably all of you know, but just gonna sum it up. The technology is that you send an impulse response into a room, and then you take the impulse out, and then you just have the response. And that's a convolution, and then you can just work with that, so you can have the reverb of this room. And I think that's a really interesting technology, and we've been using that for reverb and for all the analog gear in Abbey Road and all the kinds of studios for almost 2 decades, but I use it in composition. So I record something, and then I put it into a convolution reverb, and then I have another impulse, and then you have a third thing that you can't really control, and it sounds fascinating. I really like it, and I wanted to use that as the main key. That was the idea, and that was what I wrote in my fund for Statens Kunstfond. And then when you get money, you think, oh fuck, what I'm gonna do with this? Well, I have to figure out if it works, or then you're really fucked. But it's good because it's helping you to develop. I'm just gonna see. Yeah, it's gonna help you to develop the project, to have funding, because you have to report your stuff back to people, and that's what create ideas. So I did a lot of recording, and then I went home to my studio and did some composing, and then I thought I would want to play it back in the environment again. I want to play the sound back in the environment to see if it fits. And then you need to build stuff, because you have problems if you want players to be in the environment for a longer period, because you have weather problems and you have power problems and you have different problems. So what we did, because this guy is the guy you want to work with if you're doing this. This is Rasmus Reiner, and he's a very skilled guy. He can do a lot of things. He can program. He can a lot of technician stuff. And so he helped me build these playback devices here, which is a combination of Raspberry Pi microcomputers and transducers. Transducers is probably most of you know what it is, but it's a mechanic loudspeaker that vibrates through the material it's connected through. So the idea was to convert this surrounding to these car cabinets to loudspeakers. So we built 10 Raspberry Pis to begin with Arduino motion sensors, so people could trick the sound when they were passing by. Later on, we deleted that because it was too complicated. And I bought 20 motorcycle batteries, so there were extra batteries, so we could have each individual player out there in the forest for a longer period, just to stand there and play through the material. So this is the transducer here, and this is the players here. We're up here to install that, and this is the prototype. You just see the prototype of how it's working.
Så vi skulle på vej med vores lille setup her, hvor vi skal ud og teste bilerne, sensor og batteri og computer, Raspberry Pi her, og det virker faktisk rigtig fint.
So that's the prototype for the project. I think the technology, even though I think it's very, very important that when you start out and you have a space, it's very important that you don't think about the technology, because many people are getting caught up in technology, but it's how it works in the space and how it reacts. That's the important thing. I do think so. So even though it was a complicated technology, we ended up deleting all the Arduino motion trackers because it was too complicated to put that out to 10 cars and collecting it each night and install it each day, because we had to install it each morning and collect the playback devices each evening, because we didn't want any damage on the playback speakers. But the important thing, I'm just going to take the time, because I think we should jump further, because you can see another time you can see the final installation later on, because it's actually it doesn't really work that well on a two-dimensional screen. It works better in real life. But the idea of the installation was that the sound, even though the thing that you see right now, that's just recorded on an iPhone with an iPhone speaker. It's not recorded with any fancy gear. But when you are there in real life, it's like the sound is on the same level as the environment. It's not music that's playing constantly, because that doesn't really work to just install a kind of song in each car and just let it play. It needs more time when you move around and you discover the installation. You need different parts to last longer than you could do if you was just sitting and watching it on a screen or listening to it. So the installation is one thing. I think it really worked well. Actually, I think it's my favorite project so far. I really enjoyed the weeks I was there investigating, and the installation was running. I was thinking, wow, this is something really special. For me, it was something really special. And I was thinking, how can I reproduce that special feeling? And then you're fucked, because you can't. But in June, the installation was there, and we're not going to listen to it because we don't have the time, because I want to talk about the next chapter in the process. And the next chapter in the process was that I want to work with the same material that I had composed for the installation, but it had to be arranged in a different space with different time. Because if we want to discover it as a virtual reality or a Dolby Atmos listening release, it's different. Each time it's a little bit different, but the idea and the concept and the material was the same, but just came in another time frame. But I wanted to work with the reproducing different sound perspectives. That's what I want to do. So I worked out an application for the artistic research where I want to investigate different sound perspectives. So the first perspective that I wanted to reproduce was a perspective independently of a speaker, which means sound that's just in our environment, without any emitter, but just sound that's here in the environment right now. Yeah, I just wanted to. That's the reproduced perspective, but we are all the sweet spot. We are perceiving the sound. How could I reproduce that perspective? That was the interest of for me to work further with this. So did some research, and we decided to do a virtual reality film in 360 format. When we were there during the exhibition, we did a recording of everything with a Candaro 6 camera and some Insta360 cameras, and I did a lot of recording with the MS microphone, but I haven't really produced anything with it yet. So I wanted to produce the perspective of me in virtual reality with head tracking, or with spatial audio and head tracking. So every time I was placing, I did recordings of each car with MS, and then I reproduced it in Reaper in ambisonic, and you can go in whatever order in ambisonic, but Reaper works for it. And then you just place different colors in the picture, and then you can just place the sounds that you want in the picture with the probably many of you have worked with virtual reality, but that's what I did. I just placed the sound in the picture, and you can use that if you use the Noisemaker Ambi bundle. There's like color connected to the sound, so you can see in the visual picture where the sound is, and then you can just work, because then when you work with it and you export it to in ambisonic in Fuma or Ambi, you can export it to Oculus Quest or whatever media you work with, and then you know where your audience are, because they are in the mask. So you can do the head tracking, and the head tracking it's just very simple algorithm of tracking. It consists of 3 different algorithms. One is the time difference between each ear, and one is the delay between each ear, and the last one is the pinner, who controls the effect and the localization and front-back direction. And then you can then the algorithm is knowing where you are, and then you produce in ambisonic. You produce the sound in 3D, and then you have the feeling of a real environment where there's sound and you moving around. That was the first perspective. You can see it we don't want to see it here, because if you want to listen to it binaural, we either need headsets or the mask, and then it works quite well actually. But here in the speakers, it doesn't really work that well. But I find a way to work with it in ambisonic, where you can sit in Chrome browser and you can just scroll around the picture, and then you can pan the sound in the back and forth, depending on what the order of ambisonic. But yeah, you can experience the virtual reality on Oculus Quest. I didn't bring the Quest today but that's the first perspective. And you can use VR in that perspective. The next perspective that I wanted to produce was with the material, but from an emitter perspective. An emitter is speaker, stereo, 5.1, 714, or whatever perspective. But I wanted to compose the music that I worked with at the exhibition in Dolby Atmos. So, yeah, it's very simple now with Logic, because there's integrated Atmos set up, but you can also do it in Pro Tools with Dolby Atmos. Is there anyone for Dolby Atmos yet? No. And then I released this EP with 6 tracks called The Redemption Sound. And it's like a musical memoir for 6 classical cars from the 20th century. But what I discovered, and I really, really, really enjoy this format. I don't know if it's not really the specific the Dolby Atmos, but it's like the format where sound comes so physical in a way. I really think so. I really think that and that's what we are dreaming of. If we look working with the electroacoustic music, you really want the music to be physical in the room. Why don't you just go to a live concert? Then it's physical. No, but I work with speakers, but I want the sound to be present in the room, and I do think that is possible with this format. It's possible to put it in the room, and it's also the music. My experience, the music became more simple when I was composing, because I didn't only mixed it, I also composed it in this format, because it was material from the cars, but reproduced and stuff like that, but it was put in another time and in another space. So I had to compose it in a new way, and I really think that it works very well because you don't have to put extra rhythm in or new melodies or middle ground, fourth ground, background. It's just enough for me when I'm sitting and listening, and the music is just coming from the back and going to the fourth, or is it in the top, or the direction is enough. I don't need extra melodies. I think it became more simple, and I also think that it became more simple because when you're listening in a three-dimensional format, you are actually listening to the music. We don't really listen that much to the music. Well, we listen to music, but most of the times when we are listening to music, we're doing a lot of other things while we are listening. And sound can just be a unique experience without any visuals in front of you. So we should hear it. We will do 2 tracks of this. We're just going to hear the first one. I think we have to jump because I want to show you the last thing. We should actually have heard the other number, because the other number is at Dolby Atmos, and then I did at the binaural walk with the exact same track But we don't have time because I want to show you the last track where I took this music that I composed and installed it back in the cars the way that I composed it. So it's back and forth and back again, and now it's gonna be, yeah. So but this is the 6 tracks, and if you don't have Apple Music, don't listen to it because it doesn't make sense in stereo. It's just too boring in a way. But you should see this one, the last one here, before we just could take some few questions. So this is the last track is the Cadillac Eldorado 56 that I installed it back in the environment again and recorded that because the perspective that I wanted to, it's very important, the perspective that I wanted to work with here, there's one more perspective, we don't have time for that as well, but the perspective here is me as a receiver, and how to reproduce that perspective was that I installed the installation and here, and then we recorded it back, and then we recorded it again with fra sidst, fra 2021, og det holder kraftedeme stadigvæk. Er det, der hedder et binauralt setup, og så har vi et 360 graders kamera ovenpå, og så har vi her en, der kun tager dybe frekvenser, en Geofon Loom mikrofon, og så har vi derovre har vi et total lydperspektiv, som er med ambisonic. Yeah, but this just so you get a sense of how to reproduce it, and then I recorded it with the 360 camera, and I just walked around with the 360 camera, and then I reproduced that to a 2-dimensional. You can take 360 and you can flatten the image, and then with the binaural microphone on top, and then I walked through the installation just to create that kind of perspective. So we end up with. Yeah, but I'm just gonna see if we have it here. We need to have it here. Boom, boom, bam. This one here. This one here. Maybe that's a new media, new term. Bye. Yeah, okay, that's it, because we need to be at another place in 5 minutes.